We have the keynote at the end. So I would encourage you to stay. Microsoft has had an earlier engagement, which meant that he couldn't be here at the start of this event. So he's coming to it now. And it's going to be held. Dave is the Chief Engineering Officer for Microsoft, which basically means that he's kind of a futurologist. So I really wanted him here because he's got an interesting perspective on where the future of interactivity might lie. And in the last week, you might have seen that there was a presentation from Google, and it was something called Google Glass. Well, Dave has his own particular kind of variety of glass, which he can tell you about now. Dave Coplin.
Thank you. I'm sure I can be gobby enough. Do the lights come up any more? I'm just worried about you falling asleep. So first of all, thank you so much for sticking with this to the end. I will try and do my best to reward your stamina and your patience. So who the bloody hell am I? I'm the token long-haired, beardy technology bloke who works for Microsoft. My job, I have the best job in the company. I never tell my boss that, right? So my job is to think thoughtfully about what technology is going to be when it grows up. And I work within the advertising and online part of our business, but in particular, I work for Bing, the search engine part of Microsoft. You may not know Bing. It's the only search engine that you don't sleepwalk into using every day, but boom, that's the only advertisement that you'll get from me today. But my job is really not so much to think about, this is how it's going to be, what Microsoft says it's going to be. It's about having a conversation. We think these are some of the trends. We think some of the changes that are going to happen to us about how we use technology as a society. And if you think that's wrong, that's okay. You have my permission to call bullshit at any point in this presentation, and we have a conversation about it. In the interest of time, we may have to take it outside. That's fine too. Somebody can hold them okay. The other thing I have to tell you, I have to start every presentation with this, and it's kind of like group therapy for me. I once was an IT consultant. Don't hate me. But it builds you some rigor and some process about this stuff, about trying to say the right thing and get things in the right order. So I want to talk to you about some technology trends. I want to talk to you about, obviously, some challenges and obstacles. And these aren't things that are going to get in Microsoft's way. These are things that are going to get in all of our way about using technology in the kind of way we want to in a modern society. And then the thing that you learn at consulting school is you never do a presentation like this without ending with 3 or 4 key takeaways. If you remember nothing else, these are the things that why that needs a northern accent, I don't know. But this is what you need to do. So let's look at some of the technology trends. So the first thing, most of you, I'm going to make some sweeping assumptions about most of you based on your age. We fail to see how much the internet has changed. Certainly in the last 10 years, we think of it as something that's a part of our everyday life. And yet the reality is, it's very, very different. So first of all, typically, have you all got computers at home? Yeah, right, of course you have, right? So what I see, and again, I work in IT, right? So I work with boring people in server rooms who try and make technology work for big corporations. And what we typically see is, increasingly, people are at home have this really rich experience of technology. They shop online, they communicate with their kids on Facebook, they do all sorts of, they play games, and then they go into the office. And that's typically what they're greeted with. They can't access Twitter or Facebook. The firewall blocks it. They've got some stupid clown with long hair and a beard trying to tell them how to use. They can't use their MacBook, or you can't use that software, and you can't do this. That's actually not what we're supposed to do. Technology is about enabling people, and we've reached this place now where people, because they're more productive at home than we allow them to be at work, it's kind of got messed up. And so we've got to work a bit to fix that, because this bloke, right, we have to get rid of this bloke, and we have to, this is the stereotypical dumb user. And you'll see him in 2 forms, right? First of all, you'll see him be created as a myth in the IT guy's mind, right? Which will be, you know what? you couldn't possibly understand how computers work. So I'm just going to patronize you and, take all the way the control, so you have to do nothing, because I'll look after you, I'll keep you safe. That's the wrong way to think about how people use technology. The other side of the dumb user is people who use it as an excuse or a badge of honor. I do a lot of work in public sector. You see lots of people who do this. It's not just public sector. You may have colleagues. Your parents may be like this. These are the sort of people who, in public conversation, will say, don't know nothing about computers. In a modern society, that's like saying, I can't read. We can't afford to let people get away with saying stuff like that, because it's just not true. Most people, even the most digitally disabled of people, will be interacting with technology at some point, even if it's just pressing the red bloody button on their TV remote. That's enough. And yet we let those people exist. We let them get away with that. So when we roll out new software, we need a training course. We need to train those people who say they don't know anything about technology. But think about it. When was the last time Facebook or Amazon or us with Xbox sent someone round to your house? So, look, we've changed the interface a little bit. We thought before you use it, you might like some training. We might bitch and moan about, bloody hell, they've moved it up here, there's a new desktop, bloody. But actually we get on and we do it and we use it, because we're actually quite resilient as human beings. And so we have to move past this concept of the dumb user. The other myth that we have is about technology is just about kids. New technology, that's just for the kids, don't know nothing, it's just for the kids. That's just wrong. We know time and time again the biggest growth area in some of the really leading technologies, let's pick social networking as an example, biggest growth area is older generations, older people who use this stuff. You would never dream of using it. And if you don't believe me, a great test is in this country, watch Question Time on a Thursday night and spark up a browser and follow the Question Time hashtag. And what you'll see there is not a bunch of kids hurling abuse at each other. It's a bunch of grown-up adults engaged in democratic discussion about the running of the country. The fact that the BBC even bothers to put a hashtag up for mainstream programming is pretty significant. So we know that this stuff broadly exists, and we'll talk about casual gaming as well in a minute, in a similar sort of context. So we can't just say it's about kids. The other incredible thing is that how social networking is effectively humanizing the web. Apologies about the made-up word. I work for a North American company. That means I can make up words as I go along. And what's basically happening with social media is the social graph, the social network itself provides a rich, warm human signal that fundamentally transforms the way that some services on the web are delivered. So in order to get this, you have to understand that social networking isn't those stupid bloody comments we pass between each other, just had the world's best coffee, LOL, send. It's actually the network of people. And when you tap into the network of people into existing services, here's an example of how we use it at Search at Microsoft. This is available in the US, but coming to the UK later. We tap into the social network when you make a search. So if I'm in the middle of Cambridge and I search sushi on my mobile phone, wouldn't it be nice to know, any good search engine will give me relevance, right? They'll give me relevant links. Here are the 10 nearest sushi restaurants. Well, okay, that's relevant. Which is the best? Which is the one I'm going to like the most? Which is the cheapest? Which is the one that's open tonight? So if I tap into the social network, I'm going to pick on Jeremy here, and let's say Jeremy and I are friends on Facebook. I search for sushi in the middle of Cambridge, and I can see from these 10 restaurants, here's one that Jeremy likes. Now the interesting thing, because I have a relationship with Jeremy, I know he knows bugger all about sushi, right? In fact, if he's recommended somewhere, I am never ever going to go there, because it would be stupid, right? But all of a sudden I've moved, because I had a relationship with him, I've got this trusted thing that can help me make a decision, because ultimately that's what you want to do. So we've moved away from this cold world of relevancy powered by a binary, dark little bit of logic called the algorithm into a world where I'm now using something that's rich and warm and human, something that I can trust. And so you can see tapping into the social graph is going to change the way that services get delivered. And then we have this incredible revolution that's happening with mobile devices. And people don't really understand why this is so important. And especially it doesn't help because for years we've been told this is the year of the mobile. Somebody's been telling me that for the last 15 bloody years. But actually, 2012 really is the year of the mobile. There are two important things about mobile devices that we have to really come to terms with. The first is one that people don't really get, but you guys will. It's the fact that for the first time, your mobile device really is personal. Think about it. The phones that you carry, the slates that you have, they're probably all authenticated to the services you use. Your email, Twitter, Facebook, all of that stuff. And that's really powerful because it means we can personalize the services in a way never ever before possible. So the fact that you're authenticated makes them important. But the second piece, the bit that's really, really important for us to get, is that your relationship with technology fundamentally changes when you have one of these devices, when it's internet capable, because it brings the best of the digital world to wherever you are from an analog perspective. It helps you bring together all of the rich data and assets that's available on the internet to help you do stuff in the real world. I'll give you two examples. I have a son, he's 6, right? If you're a 6-year-old, Kung Fu Panda is a big deal, right? So just a bit of context. So there I am, Saturday morning in Sainsbury's on my own, dispelling all of the gender stereotypes about who does the grocery shopping in our house. It's me. But I'm in the DVD aisle because, you know, like getting proper food and stuff, that, you know, you've got to work up to that. And I see, a few months ago, Kung Fu Panda 2 has just come out on DVD. So again, if you're a parent of a 6-year-old boy, I'm thinking, if I go home with that, I'm going to be a hero for the rest of the weekend. You know, I don't have to do nothing else. But you see, the thing that you don't know is I'm a bit tight. I'm in Sainsbury's. That's not a place where I'd really buy DVDs from. What happens? Without thinking, phone comes out, quick look at the barcode, and I can see that actually that's not a bad price. I'll have that. So having the ability to dip into the digital world, the place I'm at, helped me make that decision. Bought the DVD, I went home a hero. Now we can have a debate about how, you know, Amazon is causing the death of the high street and how this stuff is all terrible, and it isn't. It's an important conversation. But the bit I want you to latch onto is how much better my experience was because I could tap into the digital world. Let me give you another example. Any good train station in this country, let's pick on Cambridge, will tell you they have disabled access facilities. If you're disabled and in a wheelchair, that's next to bloody useless. What you really want to know is from where I am, show me where all of the curbs are dropped. Tell me which bloody door, which specific door do I go to that has the ramp so I can access the platform that I'm looking for. All of that data exists. It's just a question of using the mobile device to tap into it in the context of what I'm trying to do. So this capability for mobiles to disrupt is just starting to happen, and we'll get more and more. The more data we build, the more immersive we make this experience, the better it's going to be. Because, and somebody mentioned augmented reality already today, what we want to be in a place to do is to augment our physical experience. We want to be able to tap into rich sets of information, not just hold a camera up and see what points of interest are around me. What if I'm walking around town and I forget whether it was Will or Aaron, you mentioned the concept of gamifying just normal experiences. What if there's a tourism app for Cambridge, and as I walk around, I collect points for seeing the different landmarks and finding information about them, augmenting my experience, telling me more information. We're working on a pilot right now with Guide Dogs for the Blind, where we take somebody who's blind round London, and as they're walking down, let's say, Whitehall, and they pass the cenotaph, it tells them, not just that you're passing the cenotaph, it tells them about the cenotaph. It gives them more information based on their profile, helps them tap into this ritual to augment the experience that they have. This is what we all signed up for, right? This is about how technology makes the world a better place. So let's look at games. And you know, you guys know much more about games than I do. I'm a gamer, or at least I was until I had a kid. Now I'm a closet gamer, because I should be doing the important household chores, not teaching him to play Forza, as I was the other day. He's quite good, actually. So games are really important for a number of reasons. So we've all talked about gamification. This is one of my favorite examples. Volkswagen, why Volkswagen, I don't know, but fantastic. Great website called gametheory.com, just showing how you can use game dynamics to change people's behavior. And this is what we're interested in. How do you make people make positive life choices? Their example, here you've got an escalator that's, you know, everybody goes up the escalator, nobody bothers with the stairs. How do you change that behavior? Well, you get a bunch of people like you in, and a few electronics engineers, and you turn the staircase into a real working piano. And all of a sudden, guess what happens? It's fun to go up the stairs. People will do that. They'll spend time there. Another example. where they gamified a recycled bottle bank, and you would get points based on how many bottles you put in. And they did it, and it's all done in Scandinavia for some reason. And this one bottle bank got more visits in that one weekend than all of the other bottle banks in the city put together for a year because they gamified it. So this is how you tap into game theory, and this is a big part of why games are important. I want to talk to you about the side of games that people often don't talk about, but why they're important to people like me. So I live in Banbury. I quite often commute into London. And my experience when I commute into London every day that I do it is the same. I get on the train, and getting on the train next to me will be some very important looking, typically gentlemen, but not exclusively gentlemen. I'm so glad I wore a suit today. I feel just like with you, but it helps with this example. And they will wear suit, tie, and they will have a number of things, right? So they'll have a Financial Times status symbol. They'll have a big wad of paper. The bigger the wad of paper, the more important your job obviously is. And then they will have some kind of mobile device. It might be a slate, it might be a phone, whatever. And so what they'll do is they'll elbows out on the table, right? And they'll establish their domain, and they will have the paper there and all this and the slate, and they'll have terribly important, yeah, bloody hell, all these things to do, and what an hour. They don't have to be posh, right? But sometimes it helps with the example. So they're there, and then, 10 minutes into the journey, and it is just 10 minutes into the journey, they're like, nobody's looking. Out comes the mobile device, Angry Birds. Cut the rope. These are people who I have spent 20 years of my life trying to get interested and excited about technology. These are people who would say, I possibly want to use a laptop. Why would I want to use a computer? How could it help me? I'm not really interested in that. They're playing bloody Angry Birds or Cut the Rope. Bejeweled, mindless stuff. But all of a sudden, they've got a relationship with technology. They're carrying a device with them that they find valuable. So to a geek like me, that means I've got them hooked, right? So you like Angry Birds, do you? Right, well, here's some stuff that can change your job. These change the processes that you do in business. So I've got a new audience of gamers, a new audience of technology lovers that I would have never had before thanks to casual gaming. And so it's so important to continue to create that affinity with technology because we still, stupidly, you don't, but people in my industry stupidly see technology as this separate part of our lives. It's this thing that you bolt on. Because old farts like me still remember a time where you only ever saw a computer at a place of work or a place of study. You never had them at home. Good God, these are special things, thousands of pounds. They are a natural part of our lives. And we have to come to terms with that. Then we also talked about screens, and John, you talked about this. Well, he did talk about it, but now he's buggered off. So actually, we can have some fun. So Microsoft, for a long time, has been going on about this concept of 3 screens and a cloud, which, if you're Microsoft, in the early days meant we'll take something that you can have on a PC, put it on a TV, and a mobile phone. You like that? Well, okay, that's interesting. What I want, actually, is today's interpretation of that is actually, I want the same kind of experience. I want to have the same context of what I'm doing, but deliver me a different experience depending on the device that I have. So, for example, if I'm sat at home and we're watching the latest Bond movie, I'm sat with a family, right? So when the Aston drives by, I'm not going to pause it and rewind and look at the Aston again, right? Because wife's going to kill me, son's going to get bored. But I'm sat there with a slate, I'm sat there with a laptop or maybe a phone. So why don't you serve me the content there? You know that the car's going to drive by because we can audio fingerprint what you're seeing. You know that I'm sat with a family because I can look into the living room with your permission. Serve me the content there. How cool would that be? And so there's a whole range of work going into it, extending and augmenting the experience in the living room. And this goes, really far, and there's some really interesting experiments about, knowing what your social statuses are, not whether you're single or not, but are you sat on your own? Are you sat with a bunch of friends? Are you down the pub? And changing your experience based on that. And then the next part of this is moving into a very, very different world. And this is a video we do, every now and again we do these envisioning videos of what we think the world's going to look like in 10 years. And the bit I want you to pick out from this is just that every surface here is a screen. It's not a piece of plastic and glass. It's the table, it's the floor, it's the wall, it's the fridge door. Every single thing has a capability to have stuff displayed on. This is the world that we're heading into. This isn't that far away. It's maybe 10 years away, where everything around you could be displayed. And the bit I want you to think about is, you know what happens now, right? When you watch some science fiction, and typically it's a crappy science fiction film from the 80s, and you'll see they'll depict like the office or home of the future. And in that depiction, there in the middle will be this huge CRT monitor. And if you're like me, you look at that and you think, oh, that's cute. I remember. I remember when we used to have a monitor so big, I could dry my motorcycle gear off the back of it, and it would be dry by the time I went home. We're going to have the same kind of reaction in a few years when we watch Minority Report or something like that, and we see those bits of plastic and glass, and we think, oh, I remember it was all flat screens, not like the interactive paint surface as it is today, that sort of stuff. And as games designers, you've got to think about what does that mean for the gaming experience. If you've got a player that's looking at different screens, that you could augment that experience in different ways, what could you do from a games perspective? If you've got a player that enters an environment like this, and all of a sudden the stairs could change, the wall could change, the windows could change, what kind of an experience could you build around that? Because this is the world that we're heading into, and it's incredibly exciting. We also have other technologies. So this is from our research labs. This is a project called Skinput, which enables you to interact with a computer using your arms, your body. And what use is that? Well, actually, this is the ability to control an MP3 player by tapping your finger, dial a telephone number by writing the number out in the palm of your hand. All of this stuff becomes really important. And for us, we talk about this concept of screens disappearing. So no longer do I have to be sat in front of something in order to be able to use a computer. Screen almost becomes irrelevant. It's how I interact in many different ways. And this is all stuff that you can look up on the interweb. Then there's a product called Lumishare, which uses the principle of Connect. You all know about Connect, right? Fine. So cheap, low-cost device, and projects an experience that connects two disparate players. So here you've got two girls playing together, and they're playing different games. You'll see in a minute they'll play cards. And what happens, so here they are playing cards, so there's a physical deck on the right-hand side, there's a virtual deck on the left-hand side, and obviously that's inverted for the other player. So all of a sudden I'm able to connect 3D experiences, to connect different people with immersive experience. And again, this whole concept of display changes as a result. And what if these cameras, these projectors, what if they're the same price as the Kinect? They're 80 quid a pop or whatever. The world starts to get very, very exciting and very interesting. And then we've got to get past this concept of personalization. We talked earlier about mobile devices and being logged in and authenticated and how important that is. But we often forget just how crap personalization is today. My experience of personalization is typically on Amazon, and I'll go to Amazon and it'll be, hey Dave, welcome back. I see that you've bought books on Batman. Would you like books on Spider-Man? Right? To me, that's just really bad. That's really stupid. Because anybody knows that there is the dark, brooding, brutal, gothic kind of Batman, and then there's the slightly camp 1960s TV show. They're both very different things, so you can't make one recommendation based on another. The comic geeks amongst you will know that actually Batman's a DC title, Spider-Man's a Marvel title. That's very, very different. So my point is, personalization is this really blunt, basic tool. What if I could tap into a really rich set of context about an individual when they use services? How could I change the experience? And this is the way that we tend to think of it. We think about this context in 4 domains. So there's an emotional domain of the context. So am I happy or am I sad? When we demoed Connect the first time, before it was ever called Connect, it was called Project Natal, and we demonstrated it with a game called Project Milo. And Project Milo basically could ascertain whether the player was smiling or frowning, and depending on what they were doing, it would change the storyline. So if you were frowning, it would then tell you jokes, change the storyline to make you laugh. It's a very basic thing, right, in the moment, but actually it exists and it will get developed. So actually, and why is this important? Well, we all consume services differently based on our emotional state. If we're sad, for me, I'll listen to different music than when I'm happy. If I'm sad, I'm listening to the blues. If I'm happy, it's Kylie's greatest hits every time. Yeah, I hope you realize that was an example. So then there's a social domain. The social domain, as we talked about before, about extending the living room experience. So I will behave differently watching the football, sat on my own at home, than when I'm sat watching the football with my family. I'm sat watching the football with my friends. When I'm down the pub watching the football on a big stream with friends and people who may support the other team, or if I'm sat watching a laptop stream connected to other people on social network. All of those different scenarios, I will behave in a different way. So then there's environmental domain. So if you, and this happens today, if you search for sushi on a mobile phone walking down the centre of Cambridge at around lunchtime on a weekday, I'm going to assume that you're hungry. And the first results I'm going to show you are going to be the location of restaurants. If you make that same search at home at 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening, you might be hungry. You might also be looking for a recipe. You might also be trying to plan a night out for 2 weeks' time. You might be looking up the history of sushi. All of those things are possible. But the very fact that you're using a specific device, specific location, specific date and time changes what you do. And then finally, there's this broad sort of context around that's an external context that's how we behave, how we respond to broad media themes. So in the run-up to the Olympics, we're all thinking about sport more than we ever would normally. In the run-up to Children in Need, we think about kids and charity more than we ever would do normally. So my proposition is, what if you could tap into that context real time at the point of consumption of services and change the service as a result? That's pretty powerful. And despite some really scary ramifications about privacy that we'll talk about, actually that's an incredible world of personalization. That would really take us to that next generation. And then the final piece of this is how we have multiple personas, especially when we're online. How many of you are on Facebook? How many of you are on LinkedIn? How many of you use LinkedIn to talk to your friends? How many of you use Facebook to try and find a job or to talk to, right? So what's happening, a few of you, so what's happening mostly is that we choose different platforms for different parts of our persona. I am not, clearly, Dave the bloke from Microsoft all the time, as much as my wife would argue with you. Occasionally, I'm Dave the dad, I'm Dave the motorcyclist, Dave the gamer. All of those things are different parts of my persona, and I need the control over how I interact with people, especially online, to be able to exert those. And again, through that kind of personalization and really a betterment of how we use personas, we get to a world where we can expose those. Then there's this other buzzword that we have called big data. So what happens when you have lots and lots of data and you connect it together? So finally, here's a game that you can play at home. So big data enables you to take a really broad view. And when you take a really broad view, has everybody told you to take a step back and think about, and probably when you've done something wrong, take a step back, think about what you've done. So data enables you to take that view. Here's my favorite example, right? 2 cars, Toyota Prius, Land Rover Defender. Which is better for the planet? Right, so hands up if you think it's a Toyota Prius. Hands up if you think it's a trick question, it's the Land Rover Defender. Hands up if you're a budding consultant. If you're a consultant, the answer is, and actually I shouldn't ask that question in public because people don't like to admit that, but if you're a consultant, the answer to any question is it depends, right? And this is one of those questions where it does depend. If you measure the impact on the environment on a really narrow place, right, the day-to-day impact, of course it's the Toyota bloody Prius. The thing drinks water and runs on pixie dust, right? So nothing happens. And then not like the Defender that bloody does 14 miles to the gallon. Actually, if you take a systemic view of the data, if you look at the impact of the Land Rover on the planet from the point at which its components were made through to the point at which you stuff it onto the tip or you take it down the scrapyard, it's actually the Land Rover Defender, because over 75%, this is like an advert for Land Rover, isn't it? Over 75% of every Land Rover ever made is still on the road. They are basic, simple agricultural bits of kit. That's why you find them all through Africa and through most parts of Asia, because you can keep them running. You can fix them with bubblegum and baling twine, right? So you see, having access to the data fundamentally changed the outcome of the answer. And that happens in all sorts of ways. And what's going to happen, the more we get access to this data and the better we are at using it, we're going to be faced with some really interesting questions, questions that really affect the very core of what we think humanity is. Here's my favorite example from the Northeast US. Last year, they took the cell phone usage data from 50,000 people over 3 months, every call they made, the duration, the location, the time of day. And with some pretty smart maths, they found out that they could predict the future location of people with only 93% confidence. So only 9 times out of 10 would they be right about where you were going to be next week. And what I love about that, right, as an example, is here you are and you think you live this wacky random lifestyle like I do. I don't know where I'm going to be next week. Cambridge, well, could be anywhere. Actually, there's a statistician who goes, actually, I know exactly where you're going to be and it's going to be there. Bloody hell. And this stuff's just going to rock our world. It's going to make us think really, really different about who we are. We use big data at Microsoft, and we used it to do some really cool things. It's quite nice when you're a company like Microsoft. So here's our problem. This is the controller, right? It's okay to people like you and me. To your average casual gamer, it's a bit scary, right? What we really wanted was this. And we wanted to develop the Kinect. And so we started the way that Microsoft would always start these projects. We'd get a bunch of coders together, and they wrote algorithms and bits of code, and they found out we couldn't bloody do it. We simply couldn't figure it out. It was too hard. We couldn't make it accurate. We couldn't make it work. So what we needed to do was to get lots of data about how it could work. And so we seeded about 1 million households with the Kinect device before they were shipped. And we streamed the data. So when Dave does that in his home, and this is the command that he was trying to select, that's important data. And we use this thing called machine learning, which takes all of that data and creates algorithms from that data that ultimately shipped into the Kinect and made it the device that it is today. So data's massively important. More and more data becomes available. As games designers, it's stuff that you can tap into, even if it's just to make your game more immersive, to bring different types of content to the game. It's quite important. But again, from a gamification perspective, there's lots of things you can do for social good. But it also has the benefit of meaning that actually data scientists, the data geeks, the mathematicians amongst us, these are going to be the rock stars of the new world, right? These are going to be the people who are the only people who can figure out, and this is already happening today, if you get close to big organizations like Microsoft, but not just us, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, anybody who's into analyzing an element of what happens, it's all about data. And this is really crucial to understand, because these are going to be the guys that help the world turn. So I promised you some challenges and obstacles. The first one is this classic thing that we've always faced. The better we get at doing this stuff, the higher our expectations are as a society that we want it to do more. My favorite example was I was sat with my lad. We were doing some stuff with Channel 4 News about the time that we released the voice control of Xbox, so just before Christmas. And we've got the beta code at home, and I was going to get interviewed the next day, so I'm doing my homework like any good sort of company representative, and I'm sat with my son, and he's like, Xbox, play this game, Xbox, play this movie, and it's all pretty cool. And then he looks at me, and he runs off into the kitchen, and then I hear this little voice, microwave, make my tea. Dad, the microwave's bust. And of course he's 6, right? But to him, if I can control the TV with my voice, why can't I control the microwave? Why that should work. And so this is one of these really natural human traits that we've got. And for me, the thing I love about it is twofold. One, because our expectations will always outstrip our capability to deliver, I'm always going to have a job in futurology. But hey, not that you should care. So I may suck at it. You have to tell me afterwards. But secondly, the more you bitch and moan about not being able to do the stuff that you want to do with the technology, the iPhone 5 is great, but it doesn't do this, does it? Actually, at least we're then engaged in the conversation. I know that if you weren't talking to me about it, I haven't even got a conversation. I haven't got any input from what's going. So the louder we are about our expectations, the better we get at making it happen. So then we have this other classic challenge, which is just in terms of just the data, the quantity of data that exists. From the beginning of time to 2003, we created this much data. We create the same amount of data every 2 days. Just think about that for a minute. It's absolutely phenomenal quantity of data getting published every single day. Our challenge now is not that the data, whether the data's there or not, it's finding the bloody stuff. I don't know how many of you have my kind of problem. My hard drive at home is filled with photos. The photos are family photos that I've taken. My wife will come to me on a Friday night and she'll say, well, could you find that photo of John? I think he was 2 and we were on holiday somewhere. And I'm just thinking, brilliant. That's my Friday night shot at that point, because I'm there like, is it this one? No. Is it this one? No. Well, this one? No. Because I got so much stuff. In the old days, when you used to go and get your film processed, you had a limited choice. You knew it would be one of these albums somewhere, but there was only be 5 or 6 photos you'd have to go. Now you've got billions of the things because they're bloody free. So we have to get better at finding stuff and finding stuff in a way that it can be used. Then we have this other problem as a society where we keep falling back on the crutch that technology is here to replace our need for thinking. It's here to solve our problems, that we don't have to bother with stuff now because computers will do it. And that's just wrong, wrong, wrong. The point about computers is they're here to augment us. They're here to add on, to supplement what we do, make us greater than the sum of our parts. And my favorite example of where you can see this failure to sort of understand that is in any local paper, in any week of the year. You will find a picture of some poor bloke who's just smacked his truck into a low bridge, right? And he'll be asked by the journalist, you know, he's like, well, what happened? And the reply will, sat-nav made me do it, right? Really? Yeah, sat-nav told me to go down here, you know. Well, at which point did you hand over your cognitive capability to this device and just say, make all my decisions? That's not what computers are about. Computers are about expanding the experience, giving you more information so that you can do the stuff that you want to do better. And it is about how do you make it get further and how you push yourself. And we'll talk about that in a second. Then there's freaks like me, right, who are going to get in your way, and I hope not for too much longer, but, you know, you're going to run into IT people, especially if you work with clients or big companies, who are going to want to stop you from doing the crazy, wacky shit that you guys do, right? And sometimes you shouldn't be doing crazy, wacky shit at work, but most of the time you'll be doing interesting, innovative stuff that should happen, and it's going to help benefit them. And IT dinosaurs like me have got a choice to make. We've either got to sit there and continue to patronize you for as long as it takes for you to find a way to work around me, or we can spend some time really understand how can we put you in a place such that you can do what you want to do, so that you can access those ports on the firewall, or that you can develop on this tool, or you can use this application and make a difference. And then there's this other cultural thing, this problem we have called the arrogance of the present. You have already talked about it this afternoon, about how people talk about games and they have this really different view of what games are. The problem is people can't measure the future benefit of anything because all they can measure, all they can use as a measure is how they feel today. A classic example, Henry Ford goes to the bank in 1903 to get some money to go and make the Ford cars. And the president of the bank says, what? What? Look out the window. Tell me what you see. Well, I see horses. Lots of horses. Right. How many cars do you see? Well, there are no cars. Right. Come back when you've got something that deals with horses. And the point of the example is not to say that the president's an idiot. It's just that the day he made that statement, he was 100% correct. He couldn't envisage a world that would be powered by the automobile. People you talk to about games will be in the same place. They can't envisage. Talk about the journey, Aaron, that you went on, about, you know, how do you help a company like Kraft understand the capabilities of gamification? They don't just naturally get it. You've got to walk them through because they measure it with the mindset of today. So when you develop your projects, when you work with your clients, when you think about how can you get them to where you are from a mental perspective, it's about taking a step back, understand that the arrogance of the present exists. You can't beat it, but you can recognize it. And you can maybe think, well, what if the world was a bit like this? What if people did work in this way? How would my experience be different? Then we have some other societal problems, and these are big issues, and we laugh at them, we laugh them off, but they are really significant. Will, you talked about this earlier about comments on the blog, and one of my biggest fears about internet use as a society is people being shit to one another, doing stuff online that they would never do face to face. You know, where I was this morning, I was actually at our head office in Reading talking to a bunch of primary and secondary age kids about how they can do really cool stuff with technology. I had to spend 10 minutes talking about how crap cyberbullying is and how they've got to stay safe online. I don't want a world like that. I don't want people to have to worry about it. I don't want to sit over the shoulder of my 6-year-old when he's using computers so he ends up seeing stuff that he shouldn't or being somewhere that he shouldn't, or have people bully him because people are just crap when it comes to being online. We all have a part to play in this. We all exist online, and there's a difference, please, between trash talking in the middle of Battlefield or, you know, just being crap to one another. But be good to people. Treat people online just as you would treat them in real life, and make sure those that are around you, make it socially unacceptable to be shit to one another online. It's so important because that's the stuff that's going to get it shut down. That's the stuff that's going to stop us from being able to get as far as we want to. We live in a society where free speech is really important. I can't tell you the number of publications who've thought about turning comments off, or even go as extreme as Australia, who actually, as a society, as a government, considered making anonymized comments illegal. That's a really bad answer to this problem, but it is a problem, and so we have to change the way people behave. And then the mother of all problems is about privacy, right? Because privacy is this really, really hard thing. Privacy isn't the same for any of us. It's different. It's unique to us. And so companies like Microsoft, we can't just put software out and say, you know what? There's a line. Anything above the line's private. Anything below the line's public. Because you may not agree with that line. You may think the line should be somewhere else. That line may change based on the context of what you're doing at any given point in time. So what you have to do is you have to do what Zuckerberg did. You have to give you control, give the users control. So now you're sat on 500 bloody settings that affect your privacy. You have no idea about the permutations, but you have control. And so this is a conversation that's going to be ongoing with us as a society, with us as technology companies, and with the government about what the right thing is to do. You've got to help us with that. You've got to be part of that conversation. But the other thing we have to understand is that our expectation of privacy changes as society evolves. I'll give you two examples, one made up and one real. If I go into, and you can figure out which is which, if I go into my local pub, I walk through the door, and the landlord goes, all right, Dave, your usual. And as I cheekily saunter up the bar, trying not to sort of exert any external sort of notification of my emotional state, which is inside, I'm going, yes! 20 bloody years of patronage at this pub, and now finally I've got personalised service. Fantastic. My relationship is in tatters at home, but my landlord knows what I like to drink. Fantastic. So why then, when I go to a pub in the middle of Cambridge that I've never been to before, and the landlord goes, all right, Dave, your usual, do I go, oh, bloody hell, how did you know? How did you, and I have this really weird reaction. Well, because my expectations are that this bloke doesn't know. How could he do that? But that's only because that's my expectations of how it works. Well, if there was a website called makeminealocalpint.com, I've registered the URL before any of you try it, and just in case, you never know. And I upload a picture, here's what I like to drink, landlords of the country, avail me of your service. All of a sudden, I'm in a world where that's my expectation of what the service could be. And that's why privacy is so hard. The real example of how this happens in our lives, some of you will remember this, some may not. I remember when we first got caller ID on our landline phones, and some of you will have had this experience, which will be, what? You mean my number is going to get displayed wherever I phone? I don't bloody think so. Puh, I'm not having that. And fast forward to the modern times, right to now, it's Friday night, I've just got in, it's a bit late, the phone rings. Don't recognise that number. Do you recognise that? But I'm not fucking answering that. Fantastic service. It's brilliant. Right? So you can't, as technology companies like us or BT or whoever, you can't just say that's privacy. It has to evolve. And as a society, that's the challenge. We have to get that debate. We're stuck in this place where all we could ever do when we talk about privacy, and typically it's in mainstream media, we have this stupid conversation like Facebook causes cyberbullying. No, it doesn't. Shit people cause cyberbullying. It's nothing to do with Facebook. Facebook may make it easier, may make it happen quicker, but fundamentally it's about shit people being shit to each other. So until we get to a point where we have that debate, where we can talk about how we should behave online or what we should do in terms of privacy, we kind of get stuck with what we can do. So I promised you some pithy takeaways. First thing, we have to educate for our future. We have to stop teaching people tools. I don't want to have this joke with my headmaster, my son's headmaster. If I ever catch anybody teaching my son how to use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, or any bloody software, I'm pulling him out of school. Those skills are useless to him. My grandfather went to a school without electricity. My dad went to a school without computers. I went to a bloody school without the internet. Kids today, they're going to school without hover cars, right? Poor kids, right? So, but if all we've ever done is been taught how to use the specific tools that are available at that point in time, what bloody use is that when you ultimately come out at the other end and you try and get a job? When I went to university, we had word processors, and it was horrible, 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 right? No way. They tried to teach us how to use word processors. What use is that to anybody? So we have to evolve. We have to talk about skills, not tools. We need things like critical thinking. Critical thinking is really important, something that you probably all do without thinking, but actually we need to do more of. Critical thinking is when you read something, be it online or in print, you actually think about what's the source of that information? Do I trust that source? Could it be biased? Could I, authentic? Could I verify that by looking up somewhere else? This is like, what happens today is schools typically think that Wikipedia is the just absolute abyss of despair when it comes to education. They're crowdsourced encyclopedia? Really? You don't even have to get it published? Really? Anybody can? Really? I don't think so. And yet actually Wikipedia is this really important resource. So I want to make sure that my son, for example, gets taught. When he sees something on Wikipedia, he sees an article, he can then think, actually, hang on a minute, it's been crowdsourced this. Right, so it might be right, there's a good chance it's right, but I better go and check it just in case. But he's there in the place to use the technology, to make a difference. Because again, remember, this is about augmenting experiences. I have to tell you, this happened to me only 2 days ago, and you're probably the only people who will get how cool this is. It was over the weekend, and I'm sat there cooking, like you do. He's on the DS, stuck on a particular level of Mario and Luigi, partners in time. You know, he's 6 years old. He comes, Dad, can you help me with this level? I'm sorry, John, I'm really busy. I'll be with you in 2 minutes, right? 2 minutes later, I go, and he's gone. He's disappeared. Oh, John, where are you? I'm in here, Dad. I'm on the computer. I'm just downloading a walkthrough. And as a parent, let me tell you, my wife remembers like his first words, the first time he walked, right? I got a little tear in my eye. He's just downloaded his first walkthrough. Oh, God, this is brilliant. Because this is the world I want, right? Here's a kid who's 6, who's learning to use technology to help him do things in the world, to help him make a better experience, to help get past the level 6 boss or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. But he's using technology to augment it, to help him extend way beyond what he could normally reach. This is the important skills, right? These are the important skills, not how to code using a particular package, but the mechanics of coding, the mechanics of development, the principles of development. These are the important things. Because it also helps with other experiments. You have to be able to spot authenticity on the internet. I had to explain this to a bunch of primary and secondary schools who sort of knew who John Lennon was, but yeah, think about your audience. So for people like me, it means about letting go. It's mean having a confidence in how people are going to use technology, that they're going to do cool stuff with it, right? So don't get in their way, help them do it. It's also about empowering people. So we talked about games a lot today. We talked about using data. Actually, everything we do should be about helping other people do stuff. And it might be have a good time. It might be get better at a particular task in an organization. It might be making the world a better place. Our job as a byproduct of everything we do has to be how do we put people in a position to be better. If you like, it's kind of the principle why Microsoft has existed. Our stuff isn't about the products in themselves. You know, it's not about, oh, you know, another operating system. Woohoo! It's about the cool shit you can do with it. That's the important bit for us. It's about empowerment. And then there's this thing when it comes to privacy. And again, when you deal with data, especially in the games that you develop, you've got to think about privacy. You've got to think about the aspects of you holding people's personal data. The best way to do that is to be transparent. This is what we hold on you. This is what we do with it. You have a choice, right? You have the law of 2 feet. You don't like it. You don't want to use it in that way. You can walk away. But be transparent. Don't obfuscate it, don't hide it, don't make it hard to read, don't make it, you know, impossible so people can't figure it out. Be upfront about what you're doing. And then finally, and this is something you guys, it's just built in to your industry, is we talk a lot, you know, in our world about engagement, or the consumers engage, blah, blah, blah. I don't really care about engagement. What I really care about is enchantment. I want to make sure that every single person I talk to walks away thinking, bloody hell, God, think of the things I could do. Or technology is really cool. Or that bloke's a bit weird. Whatever it is, that's okay. I want them to feel enchanted by the experience. I think we all as individuals and for the companies that we work for, we have an opportunity to bring that enchantment to every single thing that we do. It's a bit like, and some of you will get this, some of you won't, the John Lewis advert at Christmas, the one that just went out. Right? So if you were a parent, you'll be like me. You'll be like, oh man, this is brilliant. Do you remember the John Lewis advert, little kid? No, some of you do. Brilliant. Anyway, the point about the advert never mentions what you can buy from John Lewis, doesn't tell you where the stores are, doesn't tell you what's going to be hot this Christmas. It just connects you to this raw emotion of kids at Christmas doing stuff for their parents. And that was enchanting. People just got hooked on that. You can do that with your games. You can do that in conversation. Whatever it is that you do, try and get to that level with people. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a long day for all of you. I really appreciate you sticking through to the end. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
That was great. So, some questions from the audience today. Nobody's got anything to say?
Yeah, hang on. Free beer and wine, or questions for the long-haired beardy bloke from Microsoft?
Yeah. He's got a question. He must have a question. No, okay.
When will the certificate be released?
10 years. No, I'm told, well, you know what, I don't know for the UK, but I know we're going to start seeing availability as early as October. for the RT device, not for the Intel device. But, you know, think about it. It's Americans and what they call the holiday season. So they'll be ramping up. If we miss this Christmas, that would be a bad thing.
Another question?
Just a quick one. How long have you been presenting and doing the talks for?
It's my first time. For a day job, for the last 2 years, it's been my day job, but I did 20 years, basically. But I love it, right?
Everybody seems a bit dumb to try coming out. I thought you had a question. Yeah, I mean, basically, Dave is clearly passionate about technology. Hopefully he has conveyed that to you. Hopefully he has challenged some of your preconceptions and maybe changed your own thinking about technology and how you might interact with it yourselves. Question.
You seem to be quite an advocate of contextual data. As game developers, it's very easy to have an idea and go from start to finish without even considering any kind of use of that data. How could you, I know it's not your field of expertise, but how would you go about including that kind of data into?
So the first place I'd go is to work a bit of what you were saying, Aaron. I would go to the places you would never expect to find games. And I would look at the data that's available and gamify some experiences. So for example, what if you went to the NHS and said, I could build a game based on the health levels of every canteen in every hospital in the country? Right? So that data's all publicly available. And think what you could do to gamify that. I mean, you could do some really scary stuff. So you could correlate the bouts of botulism and dysentery with the 5-star rating of those canteens. Again, you know, all of those things become available. This would be a world that you would never think of. But actually, in the public sector, people are dying to literally, and people are really trying to change people's behaviour. And actually accessing that data and doing something really fun and interesting in a way that only you can. You know, you don't want a bunch of, you know, ex-IT people like me thinking, oh, I know, let's write a game. We'll call it gamification. It'd be brilliant. No, it won't. It will be shit, right? I need you guys to create a really good game experience based on that kind of data. So for me, I would try and do some public good. I would look for those data sources and see what you could do, and then go and find either a public sector or a private sector company like Aaron did with Craft and sell them something, show them something that could be done using this data. But look and see what data is available. There are some incredible data sets available from the weather through to trains, weather and trains, how exciting. Trust me, it's great. But all that stuff exists. So, you know, look and think what you can do.
Sort of. I missed a little bit, so I'm not sure if this was covered. But talking about data sets and searching through and making them available, is there a point where a search engine should become just the database of knowledge of everything rather than just pointing to it, in the sense that you say this data is available freely? What if that data suddenly disappears? What if the format changes? Format issues are the big ones. So we already have that in terms of caches and stuff like, and wayback machines and things like that. But what about the central database of all data sets to rule them all?
It's a really dangerous place to be for a search engine proposition, but there's a middle ground. The place that I would like to get to is, I think search engine homepages, frankly, are stupid. Right, so here I am trying to do something, and before I can do that, I've got to go all the way over to this bloody search engine thing, find out the information, and come back and get on with doing what I'm doing. What I really want is an API that I can call that gives me all of the goodness of search engine, but keeps me within the context of what I'm doing. And I think when search, you know, and that's the kind of direction that search, we think search is going. When that happens, you kind of get there. You're still at the beck and call as whether the data source is available or not. But to make search engine, we have this debate all the time as an industry. You know, the government in particular wants us to be responsible for everything that gets published on the web. That's really bad. That's really hard. I have people come to me from the government and they will say to me things like, Dave, we don't think people should be able to find religious extremist content using search. Okay, that's brilliant. So how would you like to do that? Well, why don't you go through your index and you mark all of the things that you think are extremist? Well, okay, so I'm a white guy from the Midlands, you know. My definition of extreme is probably going to be different to someone who's Muslim from another part of the country. So how are you going to do it? You can't make the search engines editorially responsible for the content. And I think the minute that you do, you end up, look at what's happening to Google now. And I think I've got a lot of respect for Google as an organization, but they're having a hard time right now because they change the rankings depending on their editorial feel. So if they don't want this thing to come up a lot, they want to push it down. That's what they're being accused of in the EU. That's a really bad place for us to go. At least when you come to Bing, you may think that we were different to Google or not as good or wherever, but actually we're pretty transparent. This is the algorithm, this is how it works, and you know what you're getting into. And I think it's that transparency that makes it work and not the control, and that's what's important.
Okay. I think we probably need to break there. I'd say we're running just over half an hour late because we did have the presentation, so we've got that half an hour to play with. But there is a reception in the Ruskin Gallery, starting sort of pretty much immediately. So really, all I need to do now is to thank Dave Coplin once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All the other speakers, we've got Aaron, Will, and Jim left, and all the other speakers who were here before who have now gone. So thank you, speakers. To thank the sponsors of this event, and they are the Cambridge Five. That's Jagex and Sony Studios and Frontier and Ninja Theory and Geomerics. So thank you to sponsors. Last but by no means least, an enormous thank you to Claire Denham. The front represents all the creative industries in Cambridge and is doing a fantastic job of pulling together different creative ideas and trying to get people just thinking about stuff. I mean, hopefully we've managed to do that today, and hopefully we can now go and continue that discussion in the bar. Okay, thank you for being here. Thank you very much.